So, but it's important to remember that Lilith is here and now. There's a power vacuum. She is the ascendant power. She's the tornado at our doorstep right now. There's a hurricane off in the distance that we should probably be aware of, but Lilith is here and she is in charge.
What was the real reason that Lilith was summoned, and for what purpose exactly in Diablo 4? We've speculated a lot on Lilith, breaking down everything from her goals to her source of power, and I absolutely recommend you check out those videos if you haven't already, but we haven't really gone in depth about the ones responsible for the return of the Daughter of Hatred. So, who is behind Lilith's return? What reasons would they have for bringing her back, and where was she summoned exactly? And perhaps most importantly, of all the demons of the burning hells, why would the ultimate choice be Lilith? Or is a larger threat pulling the threads of fate around the Daughter of Hatred in Diablo 4?
The Triune, who was responsible for helping Lilith return to Sanctuary, as you saw in our cinematic, they also worship the primevals, and they are hastening their master's return to Sanctuary.
The short answer of who was responsible for Lilith's return was revealed at BlizzCon 2019. During the World and Lore panel, senior quest designer Harrison Pink made mention that the Triune are actually responsible for Lilith being pulled back from the Void. Looking back at the history of the Triune, it paints a very interesting picture on how such an order has evolved to this point. At first, they were a cult who deceptively went about the worship of the three primevals, Diablo, Baal, and Mephisto, falsely parading them around to a naive humanity as the chief deities of determination instead of terror, creation in place of destruction, and comically, love, in the guise of the Lord of Hatred. During this time, it should go to note that while high-ranking demons of both Baal and Diablo's realms held sway over the temple's politics, it was ultimately governed by both children of Mephisto. First Lucian, and then Lilith disguising herself as Lucian after his destruction at the hands of Odyssean. Although she would fool all at the temple, Diablo's minion Astroga would see right through her, which will play out in our theory later. Now, after its dissolution at the hands of the Edirum, the Triune would splinter throughout the ages. One subset would later be known as the Coven and fall to worship Belial and Asmodan under the leadership of the witches Magda and Adria. Though again, a budding Nephilim would destroy their order almost completely. Now, the Triune have been confirmed to be back in play, but after more than 3,000 years of having their prayers and devotion largely unrewarded, they've found means of returning to play, one of the only figureheads to ever truly bring them tangible representation. But the question is, why? Was it simply because of Lilith's involvement in the Triune's affairs during the Sin War? But that would be impossible unless someone knew of her involvement, and the only one who held that relation to the Triune would be later sealed away by the necromancer Zale, detailed in the novel The Moon of the Spider by Richard A. Knack. Basically, humanity's memories of the Sin War were totally wiped, so only a paltry few know about Lilith and her being cast into the void. However, there exists also the possibility that the Triune themselves have ordered the resurrection of Lilith via proxy for direct means of worship or something far more nefarious. Which leads us to the enigmatic figure in Diablo 4's cinematic, whom we'll discuss in a moment, is actually believed to be the leader of the branch of the Triune, which is now labeled the Cult of Personality, and is spearheading its efforts to resurrect Lilith. It could very well be that whereas Sanctuary has turned to the high heavens or the burning hells for guidance in the past, this group seeks to look to the creator of Sanctuary instead, representing the middle ground that has been the focus since the release of Diablo 3, and arguably Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction, with emphasis on the Nephilim. There also exists the grim possibility that he is someone who was inspired by Lilith in the past, or perhaps he ultimately represents something darker behind the scenes, and even Lilith is a pawn in their schemes. Whatever the case, we know that the one who leads the order ultimately decides on their direction, as was witnessed in the leadership of Lucian, Lilith, and Magda. So instead of simply speculating, let's look at what we know.
I awaken in terror.
Surrender. Speak the words. Call her home.
There are still so many theories to the exact identity of the summoner in the Diablo 4 trailer. Is he the summoner himself? After all, he did tell the Zakarum priest to speak the words of summoning, and he didn't speak them himself to finish the ritual. That may have to be examined later. As far for who he is, that remains a mystery, but what he is will be the focus for now. He bears all of the factors of appearance that are typically used to describe the ancients, said to stand taller than humans with very similar features, and with the focus on the Nephilim in Diablo 3, it stands to reason that not only is he a Nephilim, but quite possibly one of the older generations before they became diluted into the humans we know today. Whether he be Rathma or someone different remains a mystery, but he definitely has an intimate knowledge of Lilith and her current whereabouts prior to summoning, something that Rathma knew and few others. Curiously, in the art of Diablo, you can see the summoner standing at Lilith's right hand with two serpents intertwined around his neck. This symbol was later changed to a pentagram, notably for the cutscene that was released during the game's reveal at BlizzCon 2019. Now, while this is typically associated with the burning hells at large and is pretty generic sign of the devil, the art of Diablo, which was released around the same time of BlizzCon, has an interesting direct revelation. Next to the entry for Andariel is that same symbol. While other entries have symbols representative of who they are, hers is very simply the pentagram icon, which was also a symbol prevalent in Act 1 of Diablo 2, Andariel's act. Could this have very well been a clue that the Triune is also following Andariel, who, like her brother Juriel, has been revealed in concept art and are confirmed to be loosed upon Sanctuary? Though we are yet to see gameplay of Andariel, it is also possible that the entwined dragons around the summoner's neck is indicative of the two heads of the dragon Tathamet, the twins Juriel and Andariel, not necessarily Tragul and Rathma as he's viewed in a draconic state. Perhaps it's time for the lesser evils to shine. So many theories, so little hard information. Though we don't know who the summoner is, his position is more than evident. Perhaps equally as curious is the location of the summoning that took place. Of all the mysteries surrounding the return of Lilith, the location of the ritual is most curious. Upon first examination, it would appear to be the Tristram Cathedral. What with the worn down, ruined town heavily resembling Tristram in the opening cinematic of Diablo 1, and a Zakarum church with a large hole where the altar typically stands in a church such as this. However, multiple factors rule this out as the case. The church shown in Diablo 4 cinematic appears very small, the building on level ground with the rest of town and made of wood. By contrast, the Tristram Cathedral sits up on a hill a ways from town, made of stone with a large bell tower and much grander in scale by comparison. However, multiple factors rule this out as the case. The curious factor that is often the core of this argument is the hole in the altar platform supposedly made by Tyrael when he fell from heaven in the opening cinematic of Diablo 3. However, by increasing the brightness of the screenshot of this location, we can see clearly excavation tools surrounding the site. If this were indeed Tristram's cathedral with the size of a hole left by Tyrael, this would not have been necessary at all. This church is just as likely to be Wortham Chapel, given the general layout of the town relative to the building's location. More curious are the symbols found within the summoning site. In our video on the return of the Primevals, we examined the symbology behind the runes found in the Diablo 4 cinematic and now two pieces of released concept art. What we hadn't yet discovered was the origin of the symbols. Detailed within the Book of Adria and Book of Tyrael are a multitude of symbols reflective of the same ritual markings we see in the catacombs during the cinematic, such as the handprint markings on a hematic key outside the summoning room, which looks strangely like the symbol for the mage clans. But that's not the end of it. Also recorded in the art of Diablo are a myriad of other symbols representative of various figures in the Angiris Council and Great Evils. Most curiously is the symbol for Tyrael, which is a mark for the same symbol inside and out of the summoning room. What could Tyrael possibly have to do with summoning Lilith? Well, between the symbol of the Mage clans and the symbol of Tyrael, we may have our answers. Tyrael was responsible for the formation of the Horodrim, which, if I'm correct about the timeline, would mean this particular order of Horodrim were indeed the ones formed of various representatives of Mage clans. It is also entirely possible that someone affiliated with the Triune infiltrated the particular group of Horodrim, betrayed them, and by comparison of sigils used by the Triune, this is a very strong probability, but time will tell.
that soul stone is shattered. Those sort of essences have been scattered to the cosmic winds. You've seen Duriel, so that's one of them. And we know from history has shown that when the essences are scattered, even when they're defeated, they do find their way back.
In other videos, we've discussed the existence of organizations vying for control in the world of Diablo 4, one of which being a group that the devs have labeled the Cult of Personality. These red-robed clad zealots have been spoken of in lore as being these reclusive figures that appear to be your average villager passerby by day, and at night, they gather in secluded temples in the woods, making ritual sacrifices to their demonic masters. Their dark thoughts and feelings inspired by the atmosphere that Lilith has brought across Sanctuary. But is this cult title just a mask for the actions of the Triune? This line of thinking goes back to the Triune's history. In the days of the Sin War, the Temple of the Triune would bring in new members by promising that they could improve themselves by self-sacrifice and worship of the three deities, Diablo, Bala, and Mephis, and adopt their dogma. Through the devotion to the temple, acolytes would work themselves deeper into its teachings until they would be indoctrinated into the true path of the Triune, which followed not three random benevolent deities, but the primevals themselves. Likewise, the Cult of Personality could indeed be a front for recruitment of new members to the Triune, and bringing their morality in line with the mental easement of sacrificing mortal beings and general depravity before fully indoctrinating them into the armies of Lilith. More so than Lilith, the Triune's involvement in the world could hold deeper, darker implications than just the Daughter of Hatred. As stated at BlizzCon 19, Lilith is the tornado that's here now. There's a hurricane off in the distance we should probably be worried about, but she's the problem now. Lilith may just be the tip of the iceberg, with other, more vile evils just beneath the surface. We've seen Duriel in action and concept art of Andariel, and it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to consider that the Triune's involvement does in fact point to the imminent return of the primevals. We know that their return is absolutely certain, and it wouldn't be much of a Diablo game without the namesake baddie. But as far as how they'll return, you can bet that the Temple of Triune will be responsible and the summoning sites to boot, with the aid of Lilith. Wouldn't it be interesting if this time the Nephilim were their own masters? That's it for the video. Make sure to like, subscribe, let me know what you think of the theory of this secret cult that is bringing Diablo back to Sanctuary. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It really does help the channel out. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time.